I am mad. I am very conflicted about it all. I wasn't even sure how to feel in the moment. But one thing is for certain, is that I am mad. The news of the one who has graced a lot of inspirational views and ways of thinking in a form of entertainment that you'd expect the main thing most people will know it for is just that one thing. It was close to midnight when I had found out the news, and I had made a little post, and with that I extend said post into the form of this video that I'm making now. I have known of the man Akira Toriyama for a long time, but I can admit that I do not know of him outside of the mainstream works. I know his art was used for the Dragon Quest and Chrono Trigger game series. I know he's made Dr. Slump, and I know that he is the father of all that is Dragon Ball, Z, GT, Super, and every other approved spin-off game and everything you can think of within the in-betweens of it all. And to say his work has inspired a generation is more than an understatement. But if you said generations, yeah, that seems about right. The first anime I've ever seen was Pokemon, and my second was, well, obviously it's clear given this unfortunate video's topic. This series is the one that grew on me, and growing with it was a great experience in how you can see something, and while yes, the main thing most people go for, the fighting aspect, there are a lot more to it than the simple genre tagged label many fail to see more of within it. But yes, my first scene of this show was a cheery kid that was just like me in a small stature, sticking his butt into the water for his tail to be used as the lure to lure in the fish of extremely large size that tower over him, just for said fish to be the poor unfortunate soul to a mean kick to death by this naked kid and soon to be this boy's next meal. For a time, that was my first glimpse because that was all I got to see, because in truth, I was really just bugging my best friend, who I see as my brother, to go outside to play. And plus, he had cable. Meanwhile, my household didn't even really have a TV yet. I was probably 5 years old around that time, and in truth, it wouldn't be until a few years later until I got to see the series for myself. And as many have in similar elementary school kids fashion, rushed home and be greeted with, if I remember correctly, 4 or maybe 8 episodes a day, starting with the young but full of soul Dragon Ball up until the point all the way to the end of Z, and even a little bit of GT. But even as a kid, as great as it was to have more of the Dragon Ball series, me and a few other friends could tell something about GT just felt different. Especially around the time when you listen in on the choice they went with for the English main theme.
The Grand Tour, GT!
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they probably had that in because of how much rap and hip-hop around the time. More and more people were giving it a chance outside of the old and outdated views and ways of, it's not music, it's just criminals who are black and they do nothing but crime and make what they think is music, or whatever type of late 80s to 90s stereotype people could try and squeeze in with it. And not only that, but given the fact that Chris Brown was on Cartoon Network at a certain point, I feel like it all comes full circle. And given the fact that that was the same broadcasting company that aired Dragon Ball, Z, and GT, so I guess it kind of makes sense. While GT ultimately was just a matter of pieces Toriyama gave to others and approved of things here and there, in retrospect, I can appreciate what GT was going for. At least it had its continuations intact and maintained a level of respect for what's been established from the series, until Super ruined a few, no, maybe a lot of things that have been established. But before talking about Super, there's still the manner of influence and inspiration that needs to be contextualized. Games are a means to a lot of things, all the way from being completely useless of your time and efforts, all the way to being useful of your time and efforts, and with too many explanations that would need a multiple hourly, lengthy, long iceberg-like video that covers so many things it'd probably take years to complete, or if you have a big enough team, maybe like 1 year or so. But yes, games and inspiration. While I don't have my old drawings of what came from the many years of watching Dragon Ball with me, I can say the most notable means of grabbing an understanding on how to draw hands, or fists to be more accurate, was because of the manual that came in with my Game Boy Advance copy of Dragon Ball Z Boost Fury. The mini booklet had all the characters at display, and I hyper fixated on the hands at the time, and even came to a point that I drew my own fist as a reference, and then from the hands to the rest of the body parts, and especially when it came down to the ears, which I don't think enough people ever compliment the fact that this series, spending time to detail what most animated medias would have just used a squiggly line and called it a day. It just had that nice refined detail, and I really grew to appreciate it. And given how much of a kid, you're always like scratching in places you probably should be using a wipe or something, it kind of gave me a more appreciation for it. But not only that, but also the game map for the longest time is how I viewed our own planet's geographics. In a world where it's only South America and everything else is just China, Russia, Australia, and Japan. I'm pretty sure that's a 10 out of 10 accuracy of what our world actually is. Ironically, I played this Legend of Goku series in the reversed order, but even I was amazed about how they managed to fit in some DBZ animated intros into this small little device, this small little handheld device. Even if the quality became more crunchier as I went from the second game to the first, but at least the first two games even had intros, unlike the third. And for what it's worth, as tragic as it is for me losing my drawing passion, I know that these games, along with watching the Android Saga, is what made me understand some human anatomy, shading, baggy clothes, hands, ears, in a style that I find hard to escape from. If I was to start drawing a human, and I'd always find myself going back to that Akira Toriyama style, even when I'm trying my hardest not to. It's just a really good standing point when it comes down to learning a few artistic ways of drawing a human body, even if a little bit exaggerated at times. But before I end off the Dragon Ball Z game side of things, for now I just want to give shout outs to that GameStop employee that made the mistake selling my mom Budokai Tenkaichi 1 just for younger me to be surprised when I opened up the box and was conveniently enough the second game, especially after I had already played the first game because I borrowed it from a friend. That was one hell of a birthday surprise, I swear. Also, Budokai Tenkaichi 2, hands down, still the best story mode out of every Dragon Ball Z game that doesn't add in like some sort of time travel, time patrollers, and all that stuff. It's a great game. Kinda wish it just had the same fighting physics as Tenkaichi 3 or even Tag Team, but it's definitely a product of its time and it's pretty good, and I recommend it to anyone. Chrono Trigger, the last true RPG I've probably played that wasn't Mario Story 64 or any games inspired by it, or a ROM hack of that same said N64 game. Chrono Trigger is like the Mother 3 of Square. No Enix, just Square. Square Enix has been forsaken by Forspoken, and man, that game's ass. But Chrono Trigger surely wasn't, and using the art of Toriyama and somehow having that same sprite work speaks volumes of what the legacy of Goku series would ultimately use in the future. It still looks really great here. This game was like a revolutionary and emotional roller coaster with what it was capable of presenting within the confines of a very small regular cartridge with a size of like 4 megabytes. For a console that couldn't even do proper 3D. The great aspects the game had with its storytelling, the gameplay, the world discovery and exploration, and so much more it had to bring, but also the fact that it made use of time travel and doesn't fall apart in its consistencies, and even having a few moments where you, the player, can change events that I definitely cheated in order to have the best type of timeline, especially after going through failing Lucas Paz moment on my playthrough for the first time. I just couldn't let it end the way it did, especially not after that bone-chilling 16-bit scream the younger version of her had. But overall, the game has 15 different endings, and while yes, you need the DS, mobile, and or PC version to get those 15 if different endings, and making the original, I believe, had 13 endings within it. And to actually have something with so much replayability around that time, and crazy enough, I never knew about the New Game Plus option until a few years later after playing through everything, which kind of was unfortunate because that was the main reason as to why I never really continued Chrono Trigger around that point. It was like I beat the game and I kind of didn't want to have to end up starting all over from square one just to end up testing 13 different endings. Especially the one when I found out that you have to defeat Lavos the moment you departure, which was like, I'm thinking, how the hell does anyone do that? But I didn't know about the New Game Plus even after beating the game, so yeah, that kind of sucked. But speaking of endings, the Dream Project ending where Toriyama can be found, and all it is just him geeking out about the fact that he's in the game and he's working on games and asking his kids, are you watching? Isn't this great? And for the time, finding that out, even if I didn't experience it for myself and it was just a simple YouTube video, knowing that really made me hyped. Even though obviously with his art style that inspired a lot, it was clear as day. But still seeing him actually within the game was something that felt really good to see, especially coming from someone who's loved his work. Chrono Trigger was a game that damn near broke me, and with an art style used by the godfather of shonen anime, and if it wasn't for the fact that the PlayStation version had terrible loading, both when it comes down to transitioning out of areas and just the sheer fact that going into battle, winning battle, and then you have to wait like an egregious amount of time. It just showcases how unfortunate it is, because I would have played that in a heartbeat just to be able to see all the animated cutscenes, because all of those hit in a way that makes you wish it could have been in an adapted anime series of some sorts. Hell, every character in the game I just named after characters Toriyama created. Chrono would be Gohan and not Goku like a lot of people want him to be, because obviously Gohan's stature, his hair, and the Z sword, even though that's more in the future, but you get the point. Luca being Aurelie, purple hair, and even one of Luca's artwork looks like a short-haired version of Aurelie anyways. Marley or Meryl, however way you pronounce it, being Bulma, but instead of blue, she's blonde. Magus being Namek because Piccolo is too long of a word. Frog being Ginyu because it's pretty obvious and speaks for itself. Robo being Pilaf's machine. I'm pretty sure there was something more accurate in the design department, but it was all I knew besides Giru, but Giru's design doesn't really match too much. And lastly, Alia being Launch, or as her Japanese name, Lunch. And frankly about Launch, I honestly don't think Toriyama truly forgot about her, but he's just been having this running joke, this running gag about him always forgetting to pack his lunch for work or something, and he just made it so that she just doesn't appear ever again. So, you know, that's a bit of copium I'm gonna be having. The series Akira Toriyama has created, in the ways of the artistic flair he brought and inspired many with across a whole bunch of medias, is a true pillar of symbolism of respect and honor. You know you made it big when huge amounts of people in different areas of South America are coming together to see the final face-off between Goku versus Jiren. And also when it was South Americans that have been making fan-made mods of Budokai Tenkaichi 3 and Tenkaichi Tag Team just to end up calling it Budokai Tenkaichi 4 for PS2 for however long, with the many other game mods like in Budokai that can add more that can be inserted into these old classical games. And I'll never forget when my Mexican friend in elementary school spoiled me of everything from the Android, Boo Saga, and even GT because his family back home had the connections. Mind you, little kid me was still waiting to see Goku fight Demon King Piccolo around the time, and I was in probably second or third grade, but yeah, that was probably around 2003 or maybe 2002. I don't know, I graduated in 2014, so you do the math. All in all, if there is any country that isn't Japan that loves this man's work, it would canonically be one of the South Americas. Any other country, and it's just not canon. It's not canon. It's just not canon. I wouldn't believe you. No one's gonna believe you. But as great as it was, there was an evolution in the making. Something that was meant to be its own thing, and even the man himself would try to view it as its own thing and tell fans to do just the same. But after time had passed and he saw what they did to his baby, compared to what we have now with remakes, remasters, live action adaptation, bastardization, he did the most he is him, move that not many Japanese folks are known to do. He threw shade. Rightfully so though, especially since they ignored his recommendations, so they had to come in. Then later on, while giving some assistance on the team that was working on a Battle of God script, which he thought he'd get involved in just a smidgen, because he who thought at first maybe a few action scenes wouldn't be the best given how the script was going, let the animators do their thing, and ended up calling it something along of his quoted lines of calling it the Japanese animation being superb, as is what was expected compared to a certain country's live action movie, which really was no good. But then we had Resurrection of F, and while me personally, I felt it was the beginning of the regression of the Dragon Ball Renaissance that was slowly brewing up due to the fact that all good forms of things, leaks happen, and the confirmation of those leaks reside Frieza. And the only moment Vegeta could have had a good moment was taken away from him in what felt like an overall unnecessary movie, and pretty pointless at that as well. And I honestly don't know who had it worse, Vegeta getting cheated from his well-deserved revenge, or Gohan being reduced to this tracksuit wearing twink just to bring him back in Super, and then we all had to witness it once again for a second time. Speaking of Super, while it was great to have a new series, it felt like cracks began to show, and by no means do I think it was Toriyama's doing, but more on Toei and whatever other companies that have their hands on the IP and stakes and monies and investors and all that type of shebang. You see, Japan is probably the most known when it comes to selling figurines, but not just that, but also toys. Like actual toys and action figures. But it could also be the fact that I don't really watch TV anymore, so maybe I'm out of the loop on what today's kids play with. But considering technology's advancements, I'm sure in the Western side, having a term like iPad kids speaks for itself. But tying it in with the Dragon Ball's continuation after Evolution, Xenoverse doing really well, and we all know how long that series has been running. Xenoverse 3 is going to give GTA 6 a run for its money for the long-awaited sequel, but the multitude of both Xenoverse games over the years, as well as the potential that was squeezed out from new characters and transformations from Super, as said DLC. For the ones not understanding my point, it's money. But none of it involving Toriyama's side of things, but the company business side. I'm sure the man probably loved the fact that countries could get together and potentially stop illegal cartel activities, you know, if that ever gets not debunked, just to watch what his series has become. Meanwhile, it's only the big business side of things trying to put a stop to stuff like that when they know that they could profit from it. Because, you know, when you have like 9,000 plus people coming to an event and they're all watching a series that, you know, I'm pretty sure businesses would want you to pay for it. So they're obviously thinking, we're losing out on the ka-ching. But outside of that, with everything that happened, even in the Tournament of Power, and the fact that they once again brought Frieza back, probably due to popular demands, instead of the in-shape Majin Buu, I swear that he's sleeping excuse came out of nowhere. It just made the series from start to finish feel milked and became the Goku and Vegeta show. And me, I don't even care about the whole filler thing. I'd rather not watch Kai. I'd rather watch Z, especially when it comes down to certain voice acting. Because OG Gohan, OG Frieza, they were the best. I don't care if the scripting was inaccurate. I want to hear Frieza call me a monkey, damn it. But while I may have my gripes with how Toriyama may handle a few things and its consistencies, especially with Super, and if it was his choicing, how does one with 2 kids not have ever kissed the man piping her guts, or that back tingly Z cells crap? Okay, so we're just gonna remove all emotion from the aspect of understanding Super Saiyans, but alright, Super Saiyans, you know, the barbaric race, but you know, we're just gonna ignore all that. That's fine, completely fine. But even I know from this man's work, he can do a whole lot better if he had a full story completed. except for Dragon Ball Minus. That wasn't his best reimagining for Goku's origin story with his Superman bullshit copycatting. Whether it's his idea or not, I'm sure there's enough Trunks timeline, Bardock timeline, even Deity timeline manipulation that makes this one of those timelines starting point, or at least until Super gets like another movie recapped into like 30 episodes that explains everything and clears things up. I don't know, who knows? That's kind of the main issues on how this thing's going to be handled continuing on. But for the most part, that's kind of where my confliction comes in. While me and many others he's inspired, the continuation of Super or even Daima is something that feels like could be taken way off the rails, especially with the monetization Toei may try to pull. And something in comparison that I kind of want to like talk about is when Berserk's creator Kentaro Miura passed away. I'm sure a lot of people had that same feeling I'm having now. While yes, the series still going is great, but the soul of the one who began it is no longer around. While Berserk may have more of a few people that follow it, we still at least know the one who is continuing it is one of Miura's closest friends who actually knows how it all comes to a conclusion and is basically the reason as to why Miura wrote the whole Griffith and Guts dynamic. But for Toriyama, while I know we have Toyotaru and I haven't fully invested myself with the manga and understanding like where his standpoints are when it comes down to like what his involvement is, from the few chapters I did read from the manga, man, was it rough. At least the bigger points, not the what most people would consider filler, like callback city all around when it comes down to the action-oriented scenes. And I don't know, man, if someone impaled me with their whole forearm and their next words were, "Don't go dying on me just yet," the last thing I'm doing is making a Cell Saga reference and throwing the same dude a Senzu bean after I've clearly made a comeback and weakened him enough to be arrested, which was the main point in why they were going after him. And then the whole Bardock stuff with him potentially wishing out loud, but to himself for his kids to thrive and to be strong or whatever, which even if that was the case, I mean, I guess Toyotaru kind of forgot Dragon Ball Z's first saga antagonist and how that outcome ended. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe if I fully invest myself with the manga from the very beginning, which will, be a whole lot, especially with the differences that will probably feel good, but maybe not everything. But I don't know. Maybe I'll have to invest myself into that one of these days. Now look, I know this section has become a bit negative, but truth be told, it's mainly because of the fact that I worry for this series' future because I, like many others, care about how this franchise gets handled moving forward on, because we all know there's no way they're gonna let it rest. Just like how people were confused about the management of Spider-Man after Stan Lee's passing, and just like a few Berserk readers considered Chapter 364 the bittersweet end of the manga. This whole unfortunate situation is something that I hope they handle respectfully, and considering how everyone was thrown off about Daima, including myself, but that felt as though maybe Toriyama was going back to his roots in a way, just the same way Dragon Ball Z had that same kind of fishing scene with Gohan that Goku had when he was his age in Dragon Ball. And given the mixed info, the main consensus was that Toriyama was more involved into this new series, unlike the series of the past before it when Goku was the only one that became a kid again in GT. Perhaps he was going for clarity and nostalgia done right, instead of whoever thought to make Goku seem like he was dropped on his head again to capture a forced Dragon Ball Kid Goku feel in Dragon Ball Super. I just hope Toei doesn't let greed consume them. They've more than already displayed that in a few recent pasts, treating YouTubers like Nintendo treats emulators, as if people don't just use web browsers to download and get dumped files from complete strangers online. And even outside of that, I know there's the expected disrespect, as is what happens whenever a popular figure passes away. And while those people are already trash, filth, and most notably now, especially given the current climate, ruiners of a few video games, for what Akira Toriyama's domino effect was when talking about the shonen genre as a whole, it was felt everywhere in the writing landscape, whether it be parody with the satires at display to the very heavy, not hiding blatant but still honoring Easter eggs and medias, and to whatever is more to come. Just like we felt the impact of what he's managed to do, to even type in the fact that this is the final goodbye, knowing the topic of why it is the final goodbye, the pain of losing someone that deeply meant a lot to many people, to a multitude of people, it makes it all the more painful having to have typed it out, and coming to accept that is hard. It really is. I may have no direct connection to him, but a loss in life is a loss regardless, and it hurts knowing the remaining possibilities of what happens next if it gets handled really poorly. I can only hope things go well, and unlike the scum that openly trash talk those that have passed like cowards, I hope he can rest his soul in peace from the afterlife. No matter who you are or how healthy you may be, try your best to get a health checkup regularly, and make sure to recommend the same to those who you care for, or even those you know that have mentioned anything regarding health issues. And even to the terminally online shit spitters, they can just go get some mental health, but at least hopefully that can make them be better. But to the man of these many adventurous stories, I thank you for the grand tour of memories, and until I end up in the afterlife myself, whenever that may be, I hope nothing but for healed hearts for your family, and we the fans will continue sharing our energy in a balm overwhelmed with spirit. And as much as I wish this didn't have to be said yet, thank you, and sayonara, Akira Toriyama. You will be missed, but importantly, remembered for your legacy. Hey, it's me, not Goku. I wasn't sure how this video was gonna go. Debated whether I should script it or babble, but for respect purposes, obviously scripting felt more refined and more on the nose. And I actually watched the DBZ Movie 9 the beginning of this month solely because this thumbnail kept popping up into my recommended homepage or whatever YouTube algorithm type stuff. And while there's videos that debunk its possibility of even fitting into the canon that go as far back from years ago, I feel as though that it could have been that good restart or passing of the torch from Goku to Gohan, and just, had its little inconsistencies, because it's like I said, launch might have just been forgotten, even though I think it might be a running gag joke. But man, Goku being a spirit and literally breaking the rules of the afterlife and instant transmissioning just to sock Bojack in his face was a top tier moment. And if you've never seen it for yourself, I feel you understand where I'm coming from if you watched it. I thought I'd add in this section just so the video doesn't end too melancholy like. Toriyama had a lot of influence, so maybe you had the same or similar experience I had, but differently. Nonetheless, let's all look forward while maintaining the messages of what the past work he was able to give us. Go watch Dragon Ball. And by that, I mean Dragon Ball, the original. Not enough people understand the differences, and they all just call everything Dragon Ball, even though they could be talking about superheroes, where they just have 5 minutes of fan servicey just for the sake of fan servicey, and you can't really keep up with things. But I just hope we just don't get that continuing on. But yeah, regardless, for what he was able to do and establish for anime is amazing. And him being gone, there's definitely going to be a hole in many hearts. And yeah, get checked up if you can. And if you can afford it. I know I say get checked up, but shit, Lord knows I can't fucking afford that shit. But regardless, if you can make it happen, do it. And especially those in the Japanese space, because apparently a lot of y'all are having health issues just out of the blue, which is just crazy. Kentaro Miura had not the same thing, but just dealing with health issues. Hearing from Kentaro Miura, and then Bulma's voice actress, whose last line was something that felt like a proper send-off, even if it wasn't intentional. And now Akira Toriyama. But regardless, I appreciate all the works they were able to do for us, even if it wasn't just for us, but just for the joy of their creations. And I'm gonna continue enjoying what their creations were able to come about. I just hope for the best for his family. Well, you know, if you feel like commenting, giving out your experience, it's all welcome. Keep your heads held high. Be easy, my friends. Peace out.